I never imagined that a 17-year-old could quietly dismantle a lifetime of certainty, but that afternoon proved how fragile confidence becomes when it's built on habit instead of reflection. There was nothing dramatic about the moment. No raised voices, no argument. Just my granddaughter sitting across from me at the kitchen table, eyes curious rather than challenging, patience replacing urgency, and that alone made me uneasy. I've lived long enough to believe I understood life, long enough to assume that years automatically turn into wisdom, yet in that moment I felt exposed, like someone had finally asked me the one question I had spent decades avoiding. She's 17, still standing at the very beginning, where the future feels wide open and undefined. I'm standing much closer to the end, not because death is knocking loudly, but because most of my decisions are already locked in place. The roads I took, the ones I avoided, the risks I postponed, the years I traded without noticing, they're no longer flexible. You don't realize how permanent choices become till time stops offering refunds. We were sitting in the same kitchen I've eaten in for decades. Same table, same chairs, same ticking clock on the wall. That clock has measured my entire adult life without interruption, watching quietly as I grew older while insisting nothing about time was urgent. She had her phone face down, her school books pushed aside, not distracted, not in a hurry. And she looked at me the way young people look at older men when they expect insight, when they assume age carries answers by default. She asked calmly, "Grandpa, did you enjoy your life? Not are you enjoying it? Did you?" I smiled immediately, instinctively, the way men my age have learned to do. That polite smile that keeps conversation smooth and shallow. The smile that says everything is fine, even when something inside hesitates. I said, "Of course," because that's the answer people expect. Because a life filled with work and responsibility is supposed to be enjoyable by definition. But the words came out too quickly, as if rehearsed, and before I could even convince myself, I felt the pause between my voice and my heart. She noticed. Young people always notice when adults lie gently. She didn't challenge me. She didn't correct me. She didn't roll her eyes or argue. She waited. Silence has a way of demanding honesty if you give it enough space. Then she asked another question, quieter this time, careful, almost respectful. "If you were 17 again, would you live the same way?" That question didn't feel curious anymore. It felt surgical, like a blade that cuts clean instead of deep. I looked at her hands, young and steady, unmarked by compromise, untouched by time, and suddenly I could see my own hands at 17. Back then they were full of confidence, full of plans, certain that life would slow down when I needed it to. When I was her age, time felt obedient, like something that would wait patiently until I was ready to enjoy it. Mistakes felt reversible. Tomorrow always existed. Urgency felt unnecessary because the future felt endless. I didn't question the path in front of me. I stepped onto it because it was familiar, approved, praised. Fear disguised itself as responsibility, and I trusted it completely. I didn't ask what kind of life would make me feel alive. I asked what kind of life would look respectable. I didn't ask why people stayed unhappy for decades. I assumed unhappiness was normal. I believed suffering was proof of effort, and exhaustion was evidence of maturity. I thought happiness was a reward for endurance, something earned later, after enough sacrifice. My granddaughter asks why adults work jobs they hate. I never asked. I accepted. She asks why people wait until retirement to enjoy their lives. I believe that was wisdom. She talks about balance, meaning, and purpose the way I talked about stability and income. Listening to her, I realized something unsettling. She has fewer years, but she's asking better questions than I ever did. Somewhere along the way, I stopped questioning and started enduring. As she continued talking, memories surfaced quietly, not the dramatic ones, not the highlights people tell stories about, but the ordinary moments that now feel heavy with absence. Mornings I rushed through without noticing the light. Conversations I postponed because I was tired. People I loved but didn't fully see because my mind was always somewhere else, planning, preparing, worrying. I worked hard, harder than most, and I wore that exhaustion like a badge of honor. I told myself I was doing the right thing. I told myself I was being responsible. I told myself I was building something meaningful. But effort without direction doesn't lead to fulfillment. It leads to distance from yourself. I remember saying no to opportunities not because I didn't want them, but because I was afraid of wanting too much. I remember convincing myself that desire was dangerous, that ambition needed limits, that contentment meant lowering expectations. I delayed joy because it felt impractical. I postponed rest because it felt undeserved. I told myself stories to stay comfortable, that one day things would slow down, that one day I'd finally enjoy what I built, that one day I'd have time. That day kept moving further away quietly without asking permission until my body grew tired and my enthusiasm faded without protest. Listening to her, I didn't feel sharp regret. I felt clarity. Regret isn't always pain. Sometimes it's understanding. The realization that you didn't fail loudly. You succeeded quietly in a life that never fully felt like your own. That kind of regret doesn't scream. It sits. I thought responsibility meant sacrifice without limits. I thought adulthood meant silence. I thought providing was the same as being present. But sitting across from her, hearing her ask questions I once ignored, I understood something too late, but still useful. Life doesn't reward endurance. It responds to intention. I told her the truth then, not the polished version adults prefer to offer young people, not the version that justifies mistakes instead of learning from them. I told her that if I were 17 again, I wouldn't live the same way. I told her I would treat time as the most valuable thing in the room. I would listen less to fear disguised as advice. I would ask uncomfortable questions earlier while answers still mattered. I told her I would choose moments over money more often. I would say yes more freely. I would rest without guilt. I would stop assuming tomorrow was guaranteed. I would stop confusing survival with living. She listened quietly, not interrupting, not judging. She didn't smile because she felt smarter. She smiled because she felt understood. And in that moment, something unexpected happened. I felt lighter, not younger, but clearer. Maybe wisdom isn't knowing what to do. Maybe it's knowing what to question before it's too late. Maybe age doesn't grant answers automatically. Maybe it offers perspective only if you're willing to be honest about what you missed. She stood up to leave, young and unburdened, carrying questions instead of regrets, and I stayed seated, old but strangely relieved. I realized that maybe my role now isn't to relive my life through regret, but to protect her future from inheriting my silence. Maybe the value of age isn't authority. Maybe it's warning. As she walked away, I looked at the clock again. Still ticking, still indifferent, still doing what it has always done. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like life had passed me by. I felt like it had finally explained itself, quietly, honestly, without urgency, just in time to be understood. And as I sat there, watching her retreat down the hallway, I realized that the value of life is not measured by the years we accumulate, but by the moments we choose to notice, the questions we dare to ask, and the courage to act on the answers we find. I thought I had wasted so much time, yet in her presence I felt a strange redemption, a quiet opportunity to reframe what it means to live fully, even if the choices I make now are smaller, slower, and quieter than the ones I made in my youth. I understood then that every generation carries its own urgency, its own clarity, and its own mistakes. My granddaughter may not know yet how fleeting time can be, but her questions reminded me that wisdom is not a privilege of age. It is a gift of awareness, a willingness to reflect, to learn, and to live deliberately. And for the first time in decades, I felt a connection between past and future, a bridge built not by years, but by the courage to see life honestly, to honor both what has passed and what still awaits. And in that quiet moment, I realized that the most important legacy we leave is not the accomplishments we stack or the things we acquire, but the questions we inspire in others, the courage we awaken, and the perspective we share. If my granddaughter carries even a fraction of the awareness she sparked in me that afternoon, then perhaps all the years I spent rushing, avoiding, and fearing were not in vain. They were preparation for understanding this simple truth. Life is not meant to be endured, but noticed, felt, and lived with intention every single day.